Instead of Build-A-Bear workshops, Destroy-A-Bear workshops. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to my drawing and painting field of dreams. I'm gonna do some watercolor painting today. I'm going to do some pen and ink drawing today. We got a full agenda, so let's get right into it, shall we? Let's start with Godzilla. I rewatched the original 1954 Godzilla film. Man, it's good. It's so good. It's so sad. It was one of the first creature feature films of the 50s and 60s. Attack of the 50-foot woman, Attack of the Giant, whatever, creature from 20,000 fathoms. Unlike most of those movies, Godzilla has a seriously, somber tone about the destruction. It takes its monster very seriously. Because, and this is the reason why I watched Godzilla is about nuclear weapons. I got interested in the 50s. The Red Scare. People would lose their jobs because they were accused of having political beliefs. And I just thought it was insane, that whole time period. But I got into the hysteria over nuclear war. The duck and cover video, where it's like a little animated turtle and they're like, what do you do when you hear the bomb sound, Johnny? Duck and cover under your desk. And then it just shows videos of hydrogen bombs going off. And it's all these kids just hiding under their desks that apparently were stronger than 50-foot thick concrete titanium steel barricades. Really strong desks back then. I read Hiroshima by John Hersey, and then I read The Fate of the Earth by Jonathan Schell. There's always these, studies and polls that come out about how church attendance has been on the decline. So I pulled out a Bible and I read the book of Revelation. And I gotta say, if these people want to get church attendance up, cut out the book of Revelation, replace it with excerpts from Jonathan Schell's The Fate of the Earth. I'll give you a little example right here. I'll read a scarier part of the book of Revelation, and then I'll compare it. Revelation chapter 13. And the dragon stood before the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against saints and conquer them. He was the authority over every tribe, people, language, nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. He deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. For if anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is a man's number. His number is 666. There might be something more freaky in there. I didn't see something. The scariest stuff in there is about dragons that come out and then people start to worship them. So compare that to this passage from The Fate of the Earth. let us consider some of the possible ways in which a person in a targeted country might die. He might be incinerated by the fireball or the thermal pulse. He might be crushed to death or hurled to his death by the blast wave or its debris. He might be lethally irradiated by the local fallout. He might be burned to death in a firestorm. He might be injured by one or another of these effects and then die of his wounds before he was able to make his way out of the devastated zone in which he found himself. He might die of starvation because the economy had collapsed and no food was being grown or delivered, or because existing local crops had been killed by radiation, or because the local ecosystem had been ruined, or because the ecosphere of the earth as a whole was collapsing. He might die of cold for lack of heat and clothing, or of exposure for lack of shelter. He might be killed by people seeking food or shelter that he had obtained. He might die of an illness that spread in an epidemic. He might be killed by exposure to the sun if he had stayed outside too long following serious ozone depletion. He might be killed by any combination of these perils. But while there is almost no end to the ways to die in and after a Holocaust, each person has only one life to lose. Someone who has been killed by the thermal pulse can't be killed again in an epidemic. Therefore, anyone who wishes to describe a Holocaust is always at the risk of depicting scenes of devastation that in reality would never take place, because the people in them would already have been killed. Then later, no one actually experiencing a Holocaust would have any such overview. The news of other parts necessary to put together that picture would be one of the first things that were immediately lost, and each surviving person, his vision drastically foreshortened by the collapse of his world, and his impressions clouded by his pain, shock, bewilderment, and grief, would see only as far as whatever scene of chaos and agony happened to lie at hand. For it would not be only such abstractions as industry and society and the environment that would be destroyed in a nuclear holocaust. It would also be, over and over again, the small collections of cherished things, known landscapes, and beloved people that made up the immediate contents of individual lives. The other obstacle to our understanding is that when we strain to picture what the scene would be like after a Holocaust, we tend to forget that for most people, and perhaps for all, it wouldn't be like anything, because they would be dead. To depict the scene as it would appear to the living is to that extent a falsification, and the greater the number killed, the greater the falsification. The right vantage point from which to view a Holocaust is that of a corpse, but from that vantage point, of course, there is nothing to report. Okay, so replace the Book of Revelation with that, and you'll get more people in church. So, I get obsessed by like morbid things. Like they just fascinate me. I'm like a moth to the flame. And it's also just like I want to understand. Like I'm a person. Nuclear weapons are human inventions. I don't know. It does create some psychological distress, as you might imagine. Not least of which because it's not the best way to break the ice with people. Hey, what have you been up to lately? Just reading about, nuclear Armageddon, what it's going to look like when the whole world is rendered uninhabitable. Just extinction. I've just been thinking about extinction. It can create a sort of existential dread. But like you don't have to be a weirdo like me who gets obsessed with weird stuff like this and then reads everything about it. The existential dread is going to be there regardless. Like you're going to encounter the existential dread. I mean, we're coming out of this 2020 year. We've all had to confront this fragility of life. The existential dread thing that I'm bringing up is in a lot of ways central to what I do. It's like central to how I got into painting to begin with. I was working this job that I didn't like. I was not doing anything that I had just spent like years going to school for. I'd gotten out of a relationship. I was just like existing. But I woke up one morning with just like debilitating pain all through my body that persisted for like a month. It was like a month where I couldn't do anything other than just like be in pain and like try and figure out what's going on. And it was sort of like a confrontation with how fragile life is, mortality, and it was, just dread. It was just a dreadful experience. But it was very important to me in a lot of ways because, like, you only have so much time and you actually never really know what's gonna happen. So art became very important to me, and I just started painting every day. There is only so much time, and this is one of the most important things in my life. I mean, other than relationships and family and maybe my animals, I don't know. The cat keeps making sounds right now. The most important thing. I don't know, to me, and people see art in different ways, and there's a lot of, art therapy type of things, which even just saying that made me feel like I'm about to start talking about like zodiac crystal chakras or something. But like, to me, that's one of the big important things about why people should make art. Isn't necessarily just to like make pictures for the sake of them. It's like the act of doing it is like a release of this existential dread that we're all going to encounter, that's coming for all of us. We're all kind of just stuck. It's the human condition, I don't know, is there any better way to think about these things than through art? There's this beautiful sequence after Godzilla has like destroyed all these things, human devastation that this creature created. And it shows this like choir of children singing, and it shows like the destruction of this city, and it's just beautiful and sad, and creating art gives you some kind of solace. It's also that the art you create can tell a story that helps you unlock and understand yourself more. It can personify the things that burden you, give those things less power over you. At the very least, it can take psychological or physical suffering and turn it into something productive and valuable, so that even if it doesn't solve your problems, it can become an exceptionally healthy, beautiful byproduct of your problems. I mean, without art, man. If you like this type of thing, what are you doing? Head on over to parkerwinans.com. Get yourself some merch. Get yourself some goodies over there. I don't even know what accent I'm doing.